When did Nazi stop meaning Nazi?
The one I wrote down was the safe title, which was Who Benefits from Polarisation?
They're calling me a Nazi. They're calling me a fascist. I think protest is simply deciding, are you in or out?
A certain subset of knitters, in a way, are unwittingly part of a cult that they don't realise they've joined.
The biggest risk in a cult is one of your cult members just having a chat with somebody outside, because it kind of breaks this, like the fourth wall, it just breaks it apart. But he spent 30 years befriending Ku Klux Klan members, right? More than 200 people left the Klan because of him. And he...
You know, if you and I wanted to get a lot of listeners to this podcast, abrasively polarizing would probably be really effective.
It's just like, hey, everybody, just first sort out all your shit.
The answer to everything. I really think it is.
Okay. So this is my episode today. This is my topic. I think I don't know if we've agreed on the actual title, but the working title is When Did Nazi Stop Meaning Nazi?
That's the controversial title. The one I wrote down was the safe title, which was Who Benefits from Polarisation?
Yeah, I don't know. I like poking the bear.
Yeah,
like
exactly. I think this is reflective of our personalities.
I thought I'd introduce this. So the topic of today's episode, and really I'd say the topic of today's episode is, I think, quite interesting, because I think it boils down to this question that we've spoken a lot about over the last year, which is just the broad topic of polarization. And why I propose this topic to you is because there was quite an incident that my wife had a couple of weeks ago, a month ago. And I thought that might be a good way to kind of introduce the topic, to bring it in. So my wife, she's got a knitwear designer, so she designs knitting patterns and sells them. She designed a pattern called Children of Gaza sweater, which was, designed to kind of raise money for not just Children of Gaza, but she's raising it for an organization called War Child, who, children of war, but right now, a predominant amount of their effort goes into Gaza. And so she designed the sweater. She then was practicing for the Brighton Marathon for ages. She ran the Brighton Marathon, because the you can have the powder, but please donate to my Brighton Marathon.
Right. Yeah. So she was running the marathon for War Child.
For War Child, yeah.
Yeah.
She raced 5K. Got injured during the marathon, so didn't manage to complete it. But then, still kind of proud and happy, or very, very proud and happy for what she'd done. A lot of positive sentiment online. Then 3 days later, after the marathon, she's messaging me. She's in. She had to go abroad for work stuff. She's messaging me and going, "They're calling me a Nazi. They're calling me a fascist." And she's on a flight trying to figure out what's going on, because it's intermittent internet. So she's I don't know what's going on. And then and was
this comments on social media or something that she was seeing?
Yeah, so she's got quite a large, on Instagram primarily. So she has a large following on Instagram, 200,000. And it's a big part. It's a big part of the income of her and our household. It's not just a casual thing to have a side thing. It's a majority of she's worked really hard to make that business, right? So a majority of the income comes from Instagram, a significant amount of it. And she's losing followers just as a stream And then people are messaging her and saying, she was confused. She wasn't really too sure what was going on, like calling her a Nazi or a fascist and all these weird things. And then basically what transpired was an Instagram person who goes by Amber, I think, or Autumn, I think is her name. She goes by the handle Size Inclusive Knitting. Had like called her out on appearing on a podcast. Oh God, I should have prepared the podcast. As soon as you see it, it's like the most. It's just a knitting podcast. So there was these kind of two.
We'll put a link in the show notes. Let's put a link in.
It's in the show notes. It's not, it's not like some like pundit, thing. It's just two people who are knitting and talking about knitting.
Yeah.
So
it sounds innocent as innocent could be.
Because what she did was, for a previous pattern, she does this thing called mystery knit-alongs, which are cool. I wish we had them in like the tech ecosystem. I don't know how to mirror this thing in the tech ecosystem. But she creates a pattern and she releases like only part of it every single week.
Mm.
And so then like loads and loads of people just start knitting just that one pattern, and they don't even know what it is they're knitting. Is it a hat? Is it a jumper? So they're just seeing as it goes along, like an old school printer, just like bit at a time. And everybody gets excited. They talk about it. They're like posting stuff about it. She loves doing her mystery knit-alongs once a year. And so there's this podcast where it's a guy, I've forgotten his full name, Neil, and he's an old guy. He's white. He's bearded guy. There's not many guys in knitting, so it's just interesting just seeing an old guy knitting.
He's a distinctive character in the knitting world.
Distinctive character, yeah. Not well known. It's not a big podcast. It's got hundreds of views. It's just like a community thing. It wasn't like a major thing. And they just got on. So she was just watching this podcast. It's fascinating. Like, you're doing this thing and then you're watching these people do your knitting pattern and having conversations about it.
Mm.
And she's like, she wants to tell them what it is, and they're guessing things. And I watched this podcast with her because for like a month or two they followed her pattern. And so then for the final like clue release, she agreed to go on their podcast, right? And I could just be, I've been in DevOps, but this is from a community building aspect, it's just like amazing. Like, you go on the person's, but it's not a big podcast. And I'm smiling because it just felt, at the time, it just felt like a really like beautiful way to engage with a set of people who had all been following along and engaging in this creative activity that you've been doing. And so she went on it, and that was it, done and dusted. And so what Size Inclusive Knitting had kind of like said was that the guy who's on the podcast is a Nazi.
Right.
And that her going on the podcast infers that she's a Nazi, she's a fascist, that, you're also kind of enabling kind of a right-wing ideology, and that whole, it's hard to even describe what the issue particularly was, but, you have engaged with Nazis. And that was the thing that kind of like drove the whole thing. And it was also confusing because it's like happened at the same time the Children of Gaza sweater came out. So as well as getting lots of positive responses, she also gets a lot of Zionists who write hateful things and like, you're an anti-Semite, you are a Nazi. So on one side, she's getting called a Nazi from the Zionists.
Converge in a way.
Yeah. And like, I was like sitting there thinking, don't worry about it. It's just the Zionists. And after a while, I was like, hang on, no, this isn't just the Zionists. This is very weird. Driven a lot through like a Reddit channel called Craft Snark or something like that. And I dove into it and I said, Jeanette, you can't dive into this Reddit channel. It is horrific. I don't want you to see what they're writing in there. One of them even said, so there was the odd person that kind of went through there and went, hang on, wait, you're all taking this off tangent. Some people were saying, I've started knitting a Children of Gaza sweater. Now I'm going to rip it up. And you're like thinking,
that's so sad.
That's so weird. Yeah. I remember one person said, Oh, I think she's married to a person of color. She can't be like a white supremacist Nazi.
Yeah.
To which some of the responses were, she just married him to hide her fascist tendencies. And it was like, really? Like, and I was like, hang on, what is going on?
This
It
is
was a
so weird.
really, it's so weird and it's so ugly and it's so hard to even like present what was going on, but it was just an outpouring of just negative energy.
Yeah.
And she wrote, I said, are you going to do an apology? And she was like, I'm not really too sure what to do. So eventually she did do an apology, but she kept to her guns, and I'm so proud of her because one of the things she said, she apologized for a variety of things. But one of the things she said she didn't apologize for was she does believe that you can't change people's minds by not engaging with them. So she kept that in there. And the mob then saw that one sentence as the admission that she's actually secretly got fascist white supremacist tendencies, because you wouldn't have put that statement inside there. To which she did another apology, but she kept that in, and I'm very proud of her for keeping that in, because that is kind of like a familial principle that we have in kind of our family.
Yeah.
And like eventually I would say it just kind of like faded away, and you know, she lost like, I don't know, 1,000 followers or something like that, but it didn't snowball into something worse, and she kept her principles. I'm very proud of, as you can imagine, and I think I've hopefully kept some of the emotion out of it. It was a very emotional time for the family,
Yeah.
very
I
emotional time
bet.
for me.
I
I think
think,
I messaged you around the time.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know what that feels like, but I know from other experiences what it feels like when you're under attack. And when it feels like that attack is very much not grounded in reality, and there's no openness to just sit down and have like a real conversation. It's just a one-way attack that you're kind of being exposed to is really, really unpleasant thing to experience. Yeah.
It was kind of a sense of like, you there's nobody to sit and have a conversation with and debate, and there's really no
Yeah.
point having any debate with anybody at all. I am at some point going to dive into that Reddit and go, finally respond to everybody. I'll wait a while.
Wait till Jeanette's retired, and then
Wait till Jeanette's
and
retired.
then you'll log back into Reddit and let rip.
Like, I am the husband that I thought she married because she loved me. I didn't realize, It's like, but really, like, but I think I reflected on it a lot afterwards, meditated on it, and I thought, what does it really say? I think it's an excellent example of this idea of polarization, and we kind of live. Now it's not just something that is abstract. For me, it's something that you went into and kind of went into the fractal edge of what that really means, and it was kind of feel it. And that's really what I want to talk about today is like the whole, like, to expose kind of and to dive into this area of polarization. Specifically, I think it'd be interesting. I don't know if it would be interesting. It might be interesting to dive into just the terminology of Nazi and fascist, but also bring in, I think they're part of a family of terms. Washing is part of this family of terms. Climate denier is
Climate
part of
denier
this
is a
family
big,
of
big
terms.
one in the
Yeah,
environmental world. Yeah.
yeah. And that's why I said, when does Nazi stop meaning Nazi? Because I don't think people are using it to, even in how the original term was defined, they can't really define it. Fascism is the most unbelievably undefinable term
Yeah.
ever. But then I thought maybe, like, diving into, because my thesis is now this, which is wonderful from the experience. I believe that polarization is a response or the result of purity testing. and people who constantly purity test. And that was a wonderful learning experience for me, because then that helps us understand what we might need to do to help move beyond a polarized world. And that's like roughly where I wanted to dive into today. We've got a bunch of questions, but we can do them, we cannot do them, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm particularly interested in this idea of purity testing, and maybe you can just sort of explain a little bit like how you perceive that, and why, like what are the examples of purity testing? Like, where do you see it playing out in our current world, and do you think that has changed in our lifetime?
In our lifetime, that's a good question, actually.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. So the way I now see, because I'd experienced purity testing in kind of other forms as well. I'd be called a greenwasher, and I was like, well, hang on, wait, what? What have I done? So I see anthropologically, purity testing has, I think it's gossip. It's deciding. I think purity testing is simply deciding: are you in or out? Are you in this group or out of this group? And that's all I think of when I think of purity testing. Like, even when I've been accused of like greenwashing, it's not because the purity tester particularly cares about solving any problems or anything else. It's about clearly demarking the line of where belonging in one group ends and moving to the other group
Yeah.
signals, which is why I think it's the bedrock of polarization, because really it's the boundary isn't that firm. Like, between two sides is a fuzzy middle, but through purity testing, that middle just becomes firmer and firmer and firmer and firmer, and then it starts solidifying into two, I think, non-existing ephemeral camps. And
Yeah.
then the middle, the fuzziness, is lost, because that's what purity testers, they're trying their hardest not to allow the fuzzy middle.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too abstract for
No, it makes perfect
the
sense. And it's interesting
yeah.
you describe it that way, because as I hear you explaining it in that context, it sounds awfully similar to me of like a key technique in cult mind control, which is about like kind of arbitrary tests of obedience to prove that you're in the group. And if you're in the group, there are benefits, and you're treated, I'm not going to say you're treated well. You're sort of you perceive to be treated like beneficially, let's say, and you have the safety of the group, and you're included. And but there's no fuzzy middle. It's like if you're like just a little bit disobedient, then you're a traitor, and you've either got to get in line, or they're going to kick you out and persecute you, and often kind of make your life hell for being kind
That's
of
a good point.
unfaithful to the group. It's sort
Yeah.
of like, so that in that sense, it's interesting, because it sort of suggests that some of these, I don't know what the right word for them is, but these sort of kind of these groups, these unofficial groups we have in society. For example, a certain subset of knitters who follow a certain knitting influencer, in a way, are unwittingly part of a cult that they don't realize they've joined.
One other aspect of this I think is interesting is it's not trying to fix the problem. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not trying to actually, like, from a cult. I think the cult is. I think I like your analogy of a cult, because I don't think it's something that's unusual in human behavior. I think it's something that's kind of baked in us, and I'm not that. So this idea of polarization is kind of baked inside us for some reason. There must be some anthropological reason why we, like in tribal alignment, we kind of like focus in on our group to the exclusion of others. survival. There's limited resources. You can't speak to the enemy. There's no room for us just to all. There's no abundance for everybody, so we have to like focus in on ourselves.
Yeah.
But
There's also,
I think, go on.
in addition to that, kind of in the kind of what's baked into us as humans is a discomfort with uncertainty. Like when we don't know like what's going on around us, when we feel very insecure. We want to know what's the lay of the land, so that we can feel confident that we can provide for our needs and keep ourselves safe and keep our families safe and so on. And so there's a natural kind of tendency to seek certainty, and often that
Yeah,
leads to like false certainty. And so in this spectrum of, there's like always a spectrum of truth, a spectrum of understanding, but most things lie in that messy middle in between. And that's the place where we feel really, really uncomfortable, because we feel out of control and like we don't really quite know what's going on. But that's kind of the truth of most aspects of life. And so we tend to just kind of snap to the side
yeah.
that we're more leaning to.
Simpler. It's more
Simpler.
simpler to turn some variables into constants and then just live your life that way.
Exactly. Then you've got something to work with, and you can just move forward and sleep at night peacefully and pretend that everything's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So like one of the things I kind of evaluated is it's the word Nazi, and there's a category of words here. They're engineered to be an ugly word that's ugly enough that no one will defend a person that you label with that word.
Yeah.
So it's like a mechanism of polarization is to use these words. And one of the kind of like the realizations that I had is I've used these words myself in the past. Not in my early days and early kind of movings in the industry. I'm glad to say not many. I was a little bit insufferable when I first got into sustainability, but it kind of like I kind of like mellowed out very quickly. But I remember one instance. I was giving a talk, a lecture, a talk once in, I think it was Switzerland, and it was on sustainability. And a guy just raised his hand in the middle, and I always take questions when someone raises their hand unless there's some extreme situation. And he started explaining how climate change was caused by nuclear power. And he was starting to like explain his theory that nuclear power, like the power stations themselves were generating so much heat that that's what's causing the heat of the planet. And instead of responding to the argument, I said something around. I didn't. I said something was kind of in the realm of like calling him a climate denier. The whole room laughed, and he shut
Yeah.
up, and I carried on giving my talk. And I think about that sometimes now, and I'm like, I just didn't engage. He earnestly was like trying to explain a point, and I didn't engage with him. And I used this mechanism, and I did exactly what it was. No one in that room would then defend this guy because I'd like labeled him
Yeah.
a climate denier. I think the same thing happens with terms like greenwashing. Like our community kind of labels things as greenwashing, and then it's very hard for you then to go, well, hang on, let's dissect this. Is
Yeah.
it? I don't think it is. I think you're actually calling a lot of things greenwashing that's got nothing, not even on the spectrum of greenwashing. So there are these kind of like magical terms that get thrown around by purity testers just to kind of like shut down the conversation.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitic was one that
Anti-Semitic is a
that's
big one. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And there's, I don't quite know how these terms come to be. That's an interesting thing. Is like, how does our society come to adopt specific terms in this context? And I can't help but think that there must be some sort of media element to it. For example, I mean, one of these terms is conspiracy theorist.
yeah.
You know,
Yes. Yes,
right?
I've been
If you
called that.
label
Yeah.
someone a conspiracy theorist, then that's it. You've written them off as a human being.
Yeah.
They're no longer like, you should never listen to anything that comes out of their mouth. And yet, the term conspiracy theorist was like a perfectly normal term in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. It literally just meant somebody had a theory that somebody conspired. There's nothing like kind of controversial about that at all. I mean, people conspire all the time, and it's just a functional term to describe like that. I have a theory that they might be conspiring on something. And then it was actually after the assassination of JFK that it got turned into this. What was it? How did you describe these sort of like
So
weaponized
these weaponized
terms?
words. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
weaponized words. And there was like a briefing paper that went around from the CIA where they were advising government departments as well as media to basically snuff out like alternative theories and questioning of the official narrative of like the Warren Report by using this term conspiracy theorist in this way where these people are nut jobs essentially, and you shouldn't listen to them, and present it in a way where it's like, no, you wouldn't want to be perceived as a conspiracy theorist. And so they created the weaponized version of the term, which now, I mean, we're like kind of half a century down the line, and it's actually, more prevalent than ever. Partly because there are more conspiracy theories because of like the internet and so on, but the fact that there's this weaponized term means that we can't engage in conversation about those theories with the people who have theories, because that term has basically meant that now like anybody who fits into that little ambiguous category of challenging any official narrative can be immediately dismissed. So I wonder whether similar things have happened with other terms, the like anti-Semite and climate denier and these things
Woke.
like woke, that they've somehow
the other
been
way.
pushed. Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily all coming from like one end of the political spectrum, but I feel like there must be an agenda behind all of them that somehow has power behind it. Power to shape culture.
So I think then maybe that leads on one of our questions, which is like who and this I don't want this to sound like a conspiracy theory, which is that people are engineering these the polarized world. But I suppose like it's always useful to look at like who benefits from a polarized world. Like you mentioned, like the word conspiracy theorist was created to. It's very clever if they did it. That's a pretty involved little thing, which hints to me that it's not the first time they've done it, because it's not like it's not the first time. And the first pyramid was like the best pyramid. It's like the first time they used it was so successful. But it's like engineered and that specifically was engineered to create polarization, to create an in-group and an out-group, so that you would never want to be in the out-group, and then you would stay in line. So like who benefits, and I think it's going to who benefits from a polarized world? And I think go on, you go.
Well, no, I think there's a few groups, and we can sort of go through them if you want. But I think, I mean, off the bat, like if we just take that case of the CIA and the Warren Report, like the beneficiaries of that are basically the U.S. government and anybody who, even if, let's just say, the Warren Report of like what happened to JFK is 100% accurate. Let's just say it is. The problem was that the public didn't believe them. Like a significant majority of the US public didn't believe the report. And that's a problem.
Didn't believe the report.
Didn't believe the report. I can't remember what the percentage was, but it was, it was like really high. It was, I can't remember. It was like 40% of the US public like believed the report's not accurate or something. So there's this like significant pushback that means that people are losing trust in institutions. They're losing trust in the CIA. They're losing trust in the government and the president, thinking that they're being lied to. And so they then have an incentive to want to like quash that problem and say, look, trust us, everything we say is true. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that'll help them win the next election. It's just a big hassle off their backs. If the public don't trust them,
Yeah.
like, that's a
Yeah.
big headache
Yeah.
for any institution, public
Yeah.
institution. So I think even if there's no like malicious intent behind it, they've got an obvious like motive to want to like shut down the questioning. But then if the Warren report was dodgy, then they've got an even bigger incentive, because actually they're like, people are digging. They're digging for dirt,
Yeah.
and there is dirt to find. And if they find it, we're in big trouble. So
Yeah.
so then that like, amplifies the motive by an order of magnitude if that's the case.
So it kind of like it's the act of polarizing a group of people. One of the outcomes is it stops kind of investigation.
It stops
It stops
investigation.
kind of
Yeah.
it stops critical thinking, because
Yeah.
it's dangerous. It's dangerous to think critically about something, because you will then be labeled as out instead of in. I
Exactly.
think if we go like, and I think kind of like, if we apply that to, I think one of the very interesting aspects of being in the sustainability movement is the seeing, and I've seen this a lot over the last couple of years, seeing how the term greenwashing is used. And I think it's interesting because I think the majority of the organizations who do the worst on the planet never been called greenwashing, because they don't bloody report anything. They don't
Yeah.
disclose anything. There's nothing to greenwash. They don't. They just say like, "Well, screw you. We're not going to tell you anything."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they
then
just crack
and
on,
then
like, digging up minerals and,
whatever. We're just not going to
whatever
tell you
they
anything.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't
and then
pretend.
there's the organizations that do try and publish something, and some of them do an absolutely shit job at it. And then maybe a little slap on the hand is like good enough to kind of do it. Some of them just, it's a pretty decent job, and whatever, they just get labeled as greenwashing. So now I think my Jenny Morgan, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine from Microsoft, she left and she wrote a book called Cancel Culture, two cancels intentionally in climate. And she had a stat in there, which was, with the increase in claims of greenwashing, the actual amount of sustainability disclosures and kind of the work being done has kind of decreased. Like there's been like a less inclination from organizations to even do anything about it. So this label that is used to, I think, create the polarization, which is, this is a good egg, this isn't a good egg, you cannot engage with this thing because engaging would be supporting the enemy. The activity of purity testing from that example doesn't even result in the positive outcome that you want to have. It actually results in the opposite outcome that
Yeah.
you want to have. And so then you have, so the thing you're polarizing for doesn't even get you the result that you're trying to polarize to get more polarization with. So who
Yeah.
like benefits? And I think one of the things that interestingly benefits is that I wonder if if we're all just constantly trying to define this boundary line, if that's where all of our attention just goes in to defining the boundary line, we're not actually paying attention to
Really
where
going
our
on.
energy should be going to.
Yeah.
We're not actually trying to solve the problem. We're just constantly trying to figure out who is part of this group and who's outside part of the group. So that, in terms of like who benefits, that is like the act of having a polarized society, and purity testers, who I believe now are the agents of a polarized society,
Yeah.
serve the interests of people that don't want society to go, well, hang on, wait a second, stop talking to me. what's that guy doing over there? Are they conspiring? Like things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and the thing is that you've got the like kind of the online polarization. So, like the example you explained, where there's a lot of kind of division and strong opinions and hateful comments and things online. But then the same dynamic is playing out all the time at sort of a societal level. You look at, well, like American politics, UK politics with like Reform with their big win in local councils recently. And there's this thing where, so Matthias Desmet, Belgian psychologist, talks about this this idea that in order to have basically sort of for a society to move towards fascism or totalitarianism, which again in terms that are hard to define, but in that direction,
Yeah.
one of the key ingredients you need is what he calls free floating anxiety. So things like an uncertainty in the economy. You've got like the threat of war like looming over you. You've got environmental disasters like lurking on the horizon. The threat of like disease, like pandemics and things like this. So, like things that like they're kind of, you can't really tackle them head on. They're just kind of like these clouds of like fear that just hover around you in society. And if you have enough of it on a mass scale, people become very vulnerable to anybody in a position of power who promises them that they're essentially going to save you. Like, follow me to the promised land, and I'll free you of your anxiety. And so hence you get all these like, now they're called to like populist politicians, which in a way is also one of these terms. Because if you want to like discredit an alternative politician, you just call them populist, and then that means they're not credible.
They're just popular. Yeah. What's popular got to mean in democracy? It's not about, we're not hiring popular people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's kind of weird, and I'm not defending any of these so-called populist politicians, but I'm just noting that there's another one of these terms. But the reason that those populist politicians are so successful in a way is because once people get free-floating anxiety, that they're not looking for rational, tangible, like well thought through strategic solutions. That's complicated and messy and nuanced and long term and so on. What they're looking for is a pill. We talked in the last episode about geoengineering being like the pharmaceutical pill for climate change. But that's what people are looking for. It's like, I can't handle all of this anxiety that I'm carrying around with me. Give me a pill. And you get somebody like Trump or Nigel Farage or somebody who stands up and says, well, like without really grounding in anything, or even, to be honest, any of the mainstream politicians are doing it as well. And they just promise you things they're never going to give you. And they're just really saying two things. One, they're saying those people are the enemy, and I have the magic pill. Follow me and it shall be dispensed.
The recent, so for whoever's listening to this who's not in the UK, we just had what we call council elections. So for some of the local municipalities in the UK, there were elections, and you elect people from different parties, and we had a landslide victory for Reform UK, which is considered to be I hate using the terms, but like a right-wing party. Labour came to my door, and I absolutely lost it with our Labour candidate, and I was like, I'm never voting for you guys again. Keir Starmer's disgusting. And anyway, we still have Labour, but we had a big Reform. I voted Green. After Reform won so heavily, this just kind of leads to the point of like, what do we've presented the argument, I think, like, and now I'm trying to like move it to like, what do we do? What do we do about it? Because Reform won landslide. If there was a general election tomorrow, Reform would by far win from the current stats. So they are like looking
the
to
first time in our lifetime when it's even conceivable that somebody could win a general election who's not one of the two, Labour or Conservative. big parties.
Liberal conservatives. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, do you know what? I'm gonna have to steelman reform. I'm gonna have to dive into this. I want to see why are such a large percentage of the population like going for it? Is it just the narrative that you're told that everybody's a racist and they're all just wanting this and that and the other? So I did what I normally do, which I used AI, which I think AI is probably one of our solutions here. So what did I do? I said, look, steelman reform for me. Just go do your research. Here's some interesting questions I've got, but come back with me. And it came back. I try and I'm like, if I can find, I won't find it. The report it came back with. But I read like there's a significant it's kind of like 10% of varies between 10 to 20% of what you might call kind of non-white people in the UK also voted reform. It was a pretty major component of their victory. Then I read their manifesto and like what they promised, and I was like, I like a lot of this. It was like number one was nationalizing the utilities. So I
Yeah,
was
that's a
like,
winner.
what? So winner, nationalizing utilities. And a lot of the other ones, I was like, okay, that sounds fascinating. Simultaneously, I was thinking, it's just BS. They'll never do any of this because all of it needed vast amounts of money and they never explain how they're going to get it. So I think just as forget about reform, but just as a mechanism of, that was me kind of like reaching out, going, right, I'm actually going to spend effort. I'm going to try and understand what's being said. I'm sure that's what the message is that's coming along on the printed on their headlines. I'm not too sure what the everyday is actually like conversing at. It might just be as simple as, I hate Starmer. I just like the way Farage talks. It could just be as simple as something like that. But that's kind of in terms of like, how do we move forward for this? How do we move beyond kind of a polarized world? It is me engaging directly with people in reform, and that's kind of, and interestingly, that is what the purity testers can't handle.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that from a human, I mean literally from an identity perspective. I was thinking about this a lot. Your identity is somebody who spends their time defining the boundaries between groups. If the biggest risk to them is one of your, like in a cult, the biggest risk in a cult is one of your cult members just having a chat with somebody outside going, oh, I bet you're really scared about the aliens arriving. And they're going, what aliens, mate? And they go, well, the aliens, they're coming in. But I don't know what you're talking about, because it kind of breaks this, like the fourth wall, it just breaks it apart. And so it's like the purity testers themselves, that's through the accident of what it is that they're doing, can't allow one of their group to speak to the outside world because it breaks it. But that's the very thing that we need to be doing, is we need to be sitting down and chatting to them and going, hey, listen, what do you see in this guy? Like, I don't understand. I don't see it. I really don't. Please explain it to me.
But
that
this is
what
and
we
in terms
need.
of the online dynamic, which I think plays out in the political sphere as well, there is an incentive. Like the thing about who benefits, the people who benefit are the people who drive this division, because then once you've divided and conquered, you don't get everybody, but you get like a big group of people who are in one bucket.
Divide and conquer.
And you're kind of their leader or one of their leaders. Whereas if everyone's having like really nuanced, meaningful conversations, then there's just a sea of like different people in society who don't really fall into buckets. There's nobody to control. And so as like an online influencer, you want to kind of polarize people and get them into a bucket where they feel like, oh yeah, we're all a group and you're like you're the leader of the group. Even if you're not a leader in like a political sense, you're somebody they look up to as kind of one of the top people in this group that they identify with, that matches their identity.
Yeah.
And there's a real, if you and I wanted to get a lot of listeners to this podcast, being really, really like abrasively polarizing would probably be really effective. If you and I went full on, like, accusing like people of being climate deniers and greenwashing and so on, we could probably get a whole bunch of people who are like identify as being in the sustainability kind of camp, looking at us as sort of like, sort of like heroes championing the cause, and they want to rally behind us. Or we could go the other way and like, criticize somebody else and get a different following. But the thing is that I'm going to just say it, like, that's probably why you and I have a relatively small listenership.
Gone down this road.
There's not like this podcast in a way is about like the messy middle, having these nuanced conversations, exploring these uncomfortable things where it's like there is no simple answer, and some of it feels a bit awkward or icky, but you got to look at it, you got to look at the whole picture, and being open to that, and it makes people really uncomfortable, and I know, credit to anybody who does listen to this podcast for being open-minded enough to say, yeah, I want to really think things through deeply, and hear different perspectives, and be able to like hold opposing views at the same time and contemplate them for myself, have my own thoughts rather than just following somebody blindly because they position themselves as an expert. So this knitting lady, I've forgotten what she was called, but she's probably got a pretty big following, partly because she divides and conquers, and she's not got the whole of the knitting world behind her, but it's enough that she can get people to kind of unwittingly put themselves in a bucket that she controls, and sort of tap into their own insecurities. They're looking for an outlet, like you said, for they've got all these frustrations that are building up, like Matthias Desmet's free floating anxiety. It's like building up inside them. They need somewhere to go it. And somebody says, I'll give you a place to direct all.
I'll tell you who to hate.
Energy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you who to hate.
A knitter.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
the problem.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that all
that's
of your
the
problems,
source.
Yeah. All of your
she could have picked immigrants or knitters, because these are the real, and I kind of get, I love the term you just said, which is divide and conquer, which is so apt, because that is like a literal military strategy. There's a literal strategy on many different fronts: divide and conquer. Excuse me. And I think it's interesting, because if I go back to her, excuse me, what was I going to say? Well, that was what I was going to say. And one of the things I realized is that, look, you're right, there is this unbelievable tension. She's in the US. There's an unbelievable tension in the US. You're sitting there. You've got a president that, oh my God, I just does all sorts of crazy stuff. Has just gone on a random war. Tariffs, everything that's created just this unbelievable uncertainty, not just of opinion, but of things that have affected people's lives in kind of major ways. AI, all this other stuff. And I think there's this level of fear and uncertainty. And then somebody says, listen, the root cause of your problem is somebody who appeared on a podcast with two people. Okay, they didn't talk about politics or anything. They knitted, but she dared to knit with somebody who's right wing. He's a Nazi. He's not a Nazi. I would describe him as, if he's a Nazi, 80% of the people in the UK are now Nazis, because who's in the UK, I would describe his positions as your average, everyday. That's a lie. my perception of your average everyday reform supporter, who I now perhaps think is actually a broader spectrum than that.
Mm.
You know, funnily enough, a Zionist, so is a Nazi Zionist. Just square that circle. So like, you know,
Hang on, I'm feeling dizzy.
but yeah. So but yeah, so there's like, so there is, and I don't think it's intentional on anybody's part. I think her herself is just as anxious about the world as anybody else,
Mm.
but focuses attention on what is possible to focus on. What is something she can't run around and change US politics or US foreign policy or anything like that. But what you can do is what's in your realm of agency, and one of the things, especially if you're an online influencer, is influence, opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And she clearly, I'm not saying she benefits in a true sense, like her life might be miserable, but in terms of what she's trying to achieve, which is to get a big online following, it sounds like it's very, very successful. Um, and the other thing that relates into all of this is that, um, from my understanding of just sort of looking at it, um, sort of historically and sort of psychologically, it's a lot easier to create what we term as sort of polarization in a society where things are not going well,
Yeah.
in a society where you've got like a really good economy, really good social welfare, people are really well looked after. There's, it's peaceful, it's safe. People like feel inherently secure within themselves. So they're not they're not craving somebody to provide them with that pill. They're not craving like external safety, and they're also more secure to be able to like contemplate, kind of a bit more nuance on other subjects because they don't feel like the core things in life are threatened. Whereas when they feel like there's no like solid ground to stand on, they're like the economy's shit, the environment's shit. Like there's the threat of war, like AI might take all our
Yeah.
jobs, and you know
Yeah.
people are just so vulnerable because they don't have any like the core of the tree is basically kind of being eaten away, and there's
Yeah.
nothing to stand on. So they'll grab they'll try and grab on to whatever
Yeah.
looks like provides them with something solid and secure. And I think
Yeah.
that's sort of partly where we are at the moment, where we've had this, we're just at the end of a cycle of Western society where we've had this like big boom and great progress in parts of the 20th century, um, imperfectly, but like great progress in many areas of quality of life and security for people. And now, like all empires, you know, they rise and fall, and
Well, yeah.
we're now on the fall. And people can feel that we're falling, and that is a scary thing. So they're looking for something to grab onto, and somebody to like promise them that it's all going to be okay. Um, and so it's so easy to manipulate people into like divided groups, and then use them for commercial gain, political gain, influencer gain, um, whatever it might be. And yeah,
So I think we have to, Tom. We've got to go positive. Gotta get positive. We've got to get positive. We've got to get like. And I was having a look at like, because we've spoken about it a lot. We've spoken about this story that we say about you you you've got to speak to the other side, and you've got to try and. So then I went off to put research to go. Well, hang on. Are we full of shit? Has that ever worked? When has that ever worked? And I found a beautiful story about a guy called Daryl Davis. Let me find it. Hang on. Let me make sure I've got
yeah,
the right
sure.
stat. Yeah. Hang on. Yes. Um, Daryl Davis. So he was. Hang on. Where's my Daryl Davis notes? Bloody hell! Come on. Yes, that is a Black American blues musician
Hmm.
Used to play with Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis. They're the only two names I recognize from that list. But he spent 30 years befriending Ku Klux Klan members.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, 30 years. More than 200 people left the Klan because of him. And whenever he gets somebody to leave the Klan, he keeps their robes.
No way.
So he's got, yeah, I think that's
He's
a
got the
beautiful thing. You keep
200 set. He
Yeah.
could start his own clan.
Yeah, apparently he's got like a closet, and he just like opens it up, and it's got like, you know, all these Ku Klux Klan like members, their robes, and it's such. And he says it. He opens when he starts speaking. He opens the line every time. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? How can you hate me when you don't even know me? And he refused to do anything other than face to face. It was always face to face, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting aspect of it. Not even email, just like face to face. I think there's a documentary. I was going to watch it, Accidental Courtesy. Mandela, Nelson Mandela, 27 years in a cell, and after he comes out, like literally negotiated and talked to the people who put him in prison. And that today, that's called negotiation. That's called figuring out what it is. And today, we would call that you're platforming the apartheid. You're platforming them.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you're platforming them. So it kind of like just, it works. I wonder if online, I wonder if technologies has been the thing that makes it worse.
Well, I
I don't
think
know. It's a lot easier, but
it's
the
so much
face-to-face
easier
angle, I
to
think, is
be.
very interesting.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
much easier to be like the worst version of yourself in an online environment where you not only do you feel a little bit anonymous, especially some people like literally just have a profile with that's not even under their actual name, and so it's so easy to just be a kind of a bit of a nasty human being when you feel like there's anonymity and no one really knows who you are. But also just the fact that you're so much distanced that it's just words on a page. You don't have to look someone in the eye. Like, I mean, this is not this is not the same dynamic. Well, it's the same dynamic, but in a very kind of like tame way. But
Yeah.
there's so many situations in life where you have really strong feelings about somebody. You're like somebody, oh, they've done this, or they've done something, and I need to tell them how it is, kind of thing. Or
Yeah.
and you get all these like ideas in your head. Oh, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
and then you meet them, and
Yeah.
then you look them in the eye, and you just and everything changes, and you might still be
Yeah.
really really pissed off with them, but like everything changes when you look somebody in the eye, and then even if you're not the best version of yourself, it does something that kind of mellows you a bit and makes you kind of just soften down a bit and like have a more of a dialogue than online. You don't get that look them in the eye
Yeah.
moment. You just have the, oh, I'm gonna tell them this, rah, 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 and then you just type it out and hit
Yeah.
enter and walk away.
Yeah. Well,
And so I think it's
yeah.
just so easy to like let that kind of very highly reactive negative side of you as a human being become like an online persona.
Yeah. I'd also, I think I'd add something to what you just said, which is when you do engage finally, after having all those thoughts, one of the reasons you chill out was because you realize you were wrong about something.
Yeah.
And then you change your mind and you're like, oh shit. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. They were just, oh yeah.
Yeah. And often you
Yeah.
realize that actually like, oh, I thought I thought they'd done this on purpose to
They
like,
meant it.
but
Or
yeah, I thought they meant it. And actually it was just a misunderstanding, but you
Yeah.
don't, you don't really feel that until you're standing in front of them.
Yeah.
Whereas online, you can just bat off some like vile thing, and then that'll get the other person riled up, and they'll bat something horrible back to you, and then you're just in this like horrible ping pong match. So yeah, I think there's definitely definitely huge value to in person, even more so. I mean, like video calls are probably better than nothing, but I think
Yeah.
like if you can get in front of people, it's the best thing. But we live in an increasingly digital world.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Do you remember? I remember having just, I remember one very long conversation with friends. I think we lasted like half an hour arguing over what exactly is the yellow thing inside an egg called?
Okay.
Because we had a rule.
What?
We had a
Yep.
rule. We had a
Yeah.
rule that time, which was you're not allowed to use your freaking phone to find the answer. So you just have to like debate with each other, and it's fun. That rule dissolved because the tech is just everywhere now. But I remember it from like there was this moment where we didn't have tech, and the kind of conversations you'd have would just be, I think, I don't know, broader. You wouldn't now when you have a conversation, like, well, what do you think about this or what about this? Someone just brings out their phone and there's the answer there, or there's some answer there. So I think like, yeah, there is something. I think tech's got something to do. Our fault, Tom. It's our fault. Tech's got something to
It
do with
always
it.
comes back to that, doesn't it?
Oh, it's our fault. Yeah, it's our fault. But yeah, the solution to this, I'm trying to figure out what is the solution, because I think we've kind of like, I know we said before we wouldn't think about solutions, but I think we've got to try and offer something. We've got to offer
Yeah,
something at
yeah.
least. I think if we're going to offer something, it's like it's something to do with face to face, but it's not just face to face, because I think it's face to face and actually having a conversation. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just you see somebody and you're like, well, hang on, everything I assumed about this type of person just seems to be off. They're not like that. So just being around people
Yeah.
that are different to you, I don't think, maybe you don't necessarily have to have like a tense conversation about a topic. Maybe just allow it to come up.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things
Yeah,
I've found in recent years is really helpful, and I'm not saying I'm always good at it, good days and bad days, is actually when I meet somebody who I realize has very different views from me, trying not to really offer my opinion at all, and like have a conversation where I'm listening and I'm asking them questions. And what I've found is that people quite like voicing their opinions. So they're quite open, like they like to feel heard. So that's like it's quite disarming for them. It's like, oh, you know, yeah, or I'll tell you all about what I think. And if you ask questions without saying I disagree with you, just it's not a debate, and they don't even know
yeah,
what your opinion is. Um,
yeah,
it's really, really well. Firstly, I think it's kind of nice for them to be able to voice their opinion and feel like somebody listened. But it's also really good for me in giving me an opportunity to actually hear what somebody else
yeah.
thinks who's kind of just they're from a different world, they have different views from me, and I might not agree with them, and sometimes I might get a little bit like I won't say who it is, but like there's somebody who I met last year and I really like them, but they just have some very different views on certain topics from me, um, and particularly around Gaza. Let's just say that.
Right. Okay.
Last year I met them. We were having a really good
Can't
time.
believe you spoke to them.
Yeah, last time I met them, we were having a really good time, and then they brought up that topic, and then I got really upset, and I started basically arguing with them, saying, you know, telling them you know, that I disagreed with them, and then it just kind of turned everything a bit sour, and we didn't really achieve anything. Then more recently, met him again, and you know, we're having a nice time, we're chatting about random things, and then you know, he brings up certain topic. And this time I was just like, oh yeah, it's happening again. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just gonna let him talk. I'm just gonna let him talk. And it was so nice because like actually I don't agree with him, but it was interesting to hear like then he had more space to actually tell me all of his reasons why he thinks what he thinks and so on. and I could ask him questions about it. So I got greater depth of understanding, and then still actually felt like we're on good terms as human beings and we can carry on with our day and, do some other things. And I just think that's a more healthy place to be as a society. We're always going to disagree with people on things. But I think if in a world where people, they want to be right and, they want to prove that they're right, actually it's quite disarming if you just don't try and debate at all.
Yeah. So I think that one.
Are you gone a bit quiet?
Have I gone a bit quiet? Is that better?
Yeah.
Have I gone?
That's
Am I
better.
still here? Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the things is there's a difference between somebody that did something versus somebody that thought something.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. And so if you were saying you were chatting to like an IDF soldier who was like happily telling you how they shot, a child or something, and you're like, oh, I'm happy just I like having a conversation with this person, and like that's like I think a different. I don't know how you would react in that situation, or even if there's any point reacting in that situation. But it's just there's a difference between that and somebody who has thoughts around a situation or thoughts around
Yeah.
these topics. I think that's something that we should, because one of the things going back to that polarization is like they're conflating people who have done and will do terrible things versus people who just have thoughts that are different to yours. And I think one of them is you do have to push back on people who have like actively, done hateful, like truly hateful things. But someone who just thinks something that they don't even think is hateful is a very different place to kind of sit and have a conversation with them. I'm happy to have conversations with people who have those thoughts. I don't know if I'm as solid as you on that particular topic because that one's very close to home for me, as in just as a human being.
Yeah,
that one's but on many other topics, I'm very, very happy to have like a conversation with people and just understand where they're at.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Tom. Not to like lift us up onto some crazy pedestal, but I'm only here after decades now of self-reflection, shadow work, meditation, therapy, psychedelics. Like I'm not the same human being I was before, and it took a huge amount of effort to get to here. And it's not like here's the end. Here's like the start of the next 40
the more
years
you do,
of my.
The more you realize how much you've got to do, right?
Yeah. And so, like a solution, like these things, like in terms of a solution, it just doesn't seem like it's a good solution. I don't know. It's just like, hey, everybody, first sort out all your shit.
Yeah.
And then we'll actually finally get out of this mess.
I actually think though that is the answer to everything. True. I really think it is. And I think that the big problem of our society, people say, oh, it's the economy, oh, it's AI, oh, it's like, geopolitics, oh, it's climate change. And, there's always something. And when it comes down to it, I think really nearly everything is just the collective state of human consciousness at any point in time. Like it's what we're, everybody's different, but if you kind of average us out as a group, that is basically our society at any point in history. And in a way, like, this point in history, you compare it to some others, it's pretty good in some ways, pretty terrible in other ways. But I actually think that you could put all the policies in place. Like you can do everything. We'll like fix the economy, we'll like fix climate change, and we'll like make sure that AI doesn't do anything bad and everyone's protected from the downsides and keeps, well, if they don't keep their jobs, then we'll like make sure that they're looked after and they don't need to worry about having jobs and, all the rest of it. And you just like, you solve all the problems. And when it comes down to it, I think if people are still have all of the same like traumas and conditioning and just kind of negative patterns that they currently have, the whole cycle will start again, and we'll just start creating new problems from that place, because we're acting out like our inner world in the outer world, but on a mass scale of like now sort of 8 billion people. And that's the thing, like when I look at people who are saying like, oh, like we can solve the climate crisis by like introducing these green policies and investing more in renewables and things, it's like, in a way it sounds great. I don't believe that it'll work. Like, oh, we'll have world peace. Like, why do we not have world peace? Like, like we could have done this like a long time ago. We could have done this thousands of years ago. Like, why do we not have it? And I really think that there is two things. One, I think it's just a cosmic mirror. Like, it's a reflection of like where we are at as a group, not individually, but like when you average us all out as a group. And I think that it's sort of like free will and fate are two variables here. This is how I look at it. I think the free will aspect is that we all have the ability to say, you know what, I could spend a bit of time and do a bit of work on myself and try and like become a better human being and overcome some of my weaknesses and my shadows and my negative tendencies and so on. That we can all do that, and that's free will. And I think every person that does even a little bit of that, it somehow ripples out, because every interaction that they have with every other human being in their life after that is a better interaction, even if in a tiny, tiny way. I do think that ripples out. And so I think that we have more power than we think we do in influencing the kind of collective state of society. But then I think there is a fate aspect to it, which sounds a bit woo-woo, but I do think there is like a kind of a cosmic cycle. All the ancient cultures talked about, like the great year, the Yugas, the cycle of the worlds. Like they all had these different perspectives, and they all basically described that everything is cyclic, and we're going to go through this kind of like cycle of consciousness from basically just being like barbaric, ruthless, horrible beings to being like really wise and benevolent, and then we'll like kind of lose it again, because it's the same thing we talked about earlier about like the cycle of what do you call it, like empires, that they rise and fall. But like, why do they rise and fall? Because when things are shit, at some point you're like, oh my god, it's so shit, we're gonna have to like do something about this, and you start doing something about it, right? and then you start like saying, you know what, I'm gonna patch up that hole in the wall and fix the leak in the roof, and like, I've had enough, I'm gonna start making these better. And then you get momentum and it feels good, and you keep going and you keep going, and then eventually you're living in some sort of like quite comfortable existence that's really nice. And then you get a bit too comfortable, and you get lazy, and you get entitled, and you get complacent, and then things start falling apart, and you don't fix the roof, and it starts leaking again, and then it all starts going downhill until eventually you hit rock bottom again. And I think, like everything does it. Like our lives go in cycles, empires go in cycles. And I think there's a broader, I think these great ages that are talked about in ancient cultures are kind of cycles of consciousness of how we're going to gradually learn to be wiser and more benevolent and more caring and generous and so on. And at some point we cross a peak wisdom, and then we go the other way. And so I think that's the fate aspect to it, that like we're swimming in a culture that is at a certain level of maturity, and we sort of, that's what we're brought up in, right? Like you were born and you were raised in a culture that behaved in certain ways and lived in a certain way and believed in certain things, and then you're shaped by that. And so then that goes back to the free will aspect, which is like some of this inner work is actually kind of saying, well, actually, I've realized that the general state of consciousness in society right now is not really like,
Yeah.
this isn't the golden age. Like, this isn't as good as it could be. And I've been
Yeah.
conditioned at the level it is now, and I'm going to try and work on myself to see if I can sort of like climb a bit higher
Yeah.
and go on that upward
Yeah.
trajectory. Um, so there's sort of free will and fate interact in that sense. Yeah,
I th- I think I've got something. You know, as you were speaking, it just reminded me of like a realize. Like it was kind of like it's a thing that's obviously true, but I just had a moment of realization in the sustainability journey, which was, holy crap, this is the most unbelievable problem. This is the hardest thing. It is just, what am I even doing? Like, why are we even trying? It is ridiculous trying to solve this problem at this scale. And it's kind of like this insurmountable, unbelievable problem. And the way you just, and I agree with you now, you're right. Actually, you're 100% right. Like the solution is this kind of elevating of human consciousness, which is compared to solving climate change, like an orders of magnitude
yeah. If that
a bigger
problem is
challenge.
like insurmountably large, then
Yeah. I'm like, oh shit, Tom. I was hoping. So I'm sitting there going, Tom, we need a quick fix. We need a band-aid. Okay, we'll just speak to each other face to face. You're like, no, we need to like elevate. But then I was like, this was interesting part of it as well. And I was, because this is very likely to be generational. I know you mentioned like the Kali Yugas ending. And I was chatting to my ex about this, and she's Hindu. She knows this stuff like intimately well, and she was describing like really when the yuga ends, we're at the inflection point, and now at the inflection points there was like decades of just turmoil, you know. So it's going to be like a pretty crazy time until we go down. Either go down in flames and come out like a phoenix, or maybe
yeah.
scurry our way through.
Well, there's a song
Um,
on my album, Stealth Defenders of the Status Quo, called, I think it's the last song, called
yeah.
Ekpyrosis, and that's exactly
What
what
does
that is.
Ekpyrosis mean, by the way? I wanted to ask you about that.
Ekpyrosis is from the Greek cycle of the ages, which is like similar to the Hindu one, and it is this transition period between like the Dark Age, the Iron Age, and then starting to rise back up in the cycle on the other side. And there's this transition period at the bottom of the cycle. There's another transition at the top of the cycle, but the bottom one is called Ekpyrosis, and it's pyrosis is like pyro. It means fire. It's like you basically like, it's a purification by fire. So you're sort of burning down the old systems and the old ways of thinking and behaving, and um, in order, it's like a forest fire in a sense, symbolic or literal, who knows? Um, but like a forest fire, sort of clears the way for new, fresh growth.
Mm.
Um, it's sort of like the societal version of that happens every few thousand years.
And yeah, I was just like just this that was also like a realization for me, which is like, oh God, this is gonna be a challenging couple of decades for us moving forward. Nothing's gonna be easy for a while, which is
Yeah.
maybe like a bigger statement for why the solution of raising consciousness is important. And then
Mm.
maybe just leaving on I think because I was like literally meditating here earlier on this week, and again, it's one of those things. It's just like something you've been told or you've thought of for years and years and years, but then you have an insight where you see it like clearer than you've ever seen it before. Um, and I just had this thought that, you know, we behave based upon the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and about other people. We just behave based upon the stories. And we've been working with our children recently and trying to be a lot more uh strict. No, the word's not strict, but like a lot more respectful of their emotions, but also setting much harder boundaries and kind of like, listen, your feelings are absolutely valid. Carry on crying. It's all good. you can't slap your bum on your brother on his bum like that. You just can't, right? So he's just like, I can't allow you to do that. So, and I realized actually, really, what I should be doing is telling my children the story of themselves and who they are and how we behave. And so I now do something a bit different, which I just say, hey, look, we're not people that do that. I just say, look, we're not. That's not who we are as a people. And I try and like express to them, hey, look, we listen when
Yeah.
someone's crying. We give them a hug. That's what we do. That's what we do. We give them a hug. And so it was like, I think this is like maybe the story that we need to tell each other
Yeah.
in life and in the world is like,
That's
look,
it.
we just don't do that. Look, we don't do that. And it's not like you don't do that. It's not like those people do that, but we, it's like just we don't behave like this. This is just not what we do. And just by reiterating that story, maybe we start living the story. And this is what I do now when I meditate is I just go like, no, nah, we don't do that. When I have like a negative thought about myself, nah, that's not who
Yeah.
we are. We don't do that.
And
it's like a wonderful way of like rewriting your story. Maybe we need to rewrite everybody, help people rewrite their stories.
I
Maybe
think
that's
you're right.
what we're doing on our podcast.
Yeah. Because it goes back to the, like, we've spoken before about Seth Godin has this very simple concept of culture is culture equals people like us do things like this. And if you look at that on a mass scale of like, well, people like us, let's just say that's just like humans. It's not a specific little group of humans. It's just humans. Then like people like us do things like this is a story. Like it's literally like the story is that we are a certain type of people and we do certain type of things, and then you believe it and then you do it, and we've kind of we pick that up by osmosis in a less conscious way. Like you're trying to do it like consciously with your kids and think it through of like, well, what do we want to like, rather than
letting
literally
it land.
mirroring what the neighbours do and what all the people around you do. And I think actually there's so much we could gain as a society by proactively rewriting those stories and putting them out there, talking about ourselves as humanity differently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we don't go to war.
Exactly. Yeah, people like us
we just don't
do things like that. We're 21st century humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so Middle Ages, you know. Yeah. No, I think that's I love that idea. I think that's really powerful. And one thing that, this doesn't segue in nicely, but I feel like it's important to this topic, and I'll just bring it in and see how it fits, is there's this sort of framework called the drama triangle, which we may have spoken about on a previous episode.
We've spoken about it, yeah.
And it's really simple, but once you've seen it, you see it everywhere. And it is helpful as a solution because once you can see it, you can then see yourself in it.
It's a story you tell yourself about what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And the drama triangle, for anyone listening, is basically this idea that people, whether they do it on purpose or they do it subconsciously, I think most of the time they're doing it subconsciously, but some people do it intentionally, position themselves in this kind of three-way dynamic where there's a victim, there's a persecutor, and there's a saviour or a hero. And you could be any of the three, but normally people are kind of get into the dynamic of seeing themselves as the victim. That's like a common thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like the economy's bad and you're the victim, and, or, whatever it might be. Or a smaller thing, like, somebody at work upset you and you're the victim, and, but then the persecutor is like, who do we blame? Oh, it's the immigrants. It's AI, right? It's Donald Trump. There's a persecutor. And then there's the savior, which is the person who basically normally is the person who kind of stirs up this belief system, because they're basically creating the polarization of the viewpoint.
But they can't be a savior unless there is a victim and a perpetrator.
Exactly. Yeah. So they need both. So they need to be able to tell a story that says you guys are all oppressed. You guys are victims of this thing. And that's why your lives are shit. That's why you're upset. That's why you're stressed and anxious and don't have any money. And then you frame somebody as the persecutor or the perpetrator. And in doing that thing, you position yourself as the savior or the hero, because you're the person who's like, look, I've got to understand the situation. I can see what's going on here, and don't worry, I'm gonna sort it out.
Yeah.
And this is what happens on a big scale, like politically. Politicians like to position themselves as the saviors and point at somebody who they can blame so that they can tell the public, you're all victims and I'm going to save you. But I've seen it so many times just in like social situations, in family dynamics, in a lot of work situations where, you know, someone's upset with somebody else, and
I'm usually the perpetrator.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been framed, and I'm not saying I'm innocent. I'm not saying I've never done anything wrong, but like I've been in situations where what happens is that it's really hard to sit down. Like, let's say that I'm the boss, right? Because I have my own company.
You are the boss. Yeah.
Yeah, literally. And then you have employees. So it's very easy to get into a dynamic where somebody's upset about something. They could easily see like you as the perpetrator and themselves as the victim. But in a healthy dynamic, you can sit down with that person and like have a conversation with them and try and work it out. And you might not agree with everything, but there's a human to human dynamic, which is relatively healthy. Where it gets really toxic is if you get a third person who positions themselves as the savior within that like group, team dynamic, company dynamic, and they want to amplify the division, because by amplifying the division, they basically put themselves in a position of power. That like I'm gonna save you, poor other employees, and you should follow you should like give your allegiance to me and follow me and so on. And it's only happened a couple of times. You know, we've had our business for nearly 20 years, and it's only happened a couple of times, but those couple of times it happened, and then it was only when somebody I know like told me about this thing with the drama triangle. I said, Tom, do you know what's happening? And then I saw it, I was like, holy shit. And it's so toxic. It's unbelievably toxic. But once you've seen it, you're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. And you can start to gradually kind of diffuse the situation, because then you can go and like, you can talk to the person who's trying to position themselves as a savior. Maybe you, if that doesn't work, maybe you try and find a way of the hive immune system removing them from the, from the organism.
So, you act like a real perpetrator there, Tom.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. But it's for the
great, good.
The white. Yeah. The white T cells could easily be framed as perpetrators. But that's the thing about polarization, right? It's like that you can't see the nuance in things, and actually, like everything's so messy, and you know that thing of like just using the analogy of like, you know, being like a T cell in the immune system and having to get rid of some toxin, that T cell could easily be framed as as a perpetrator, because it's like trying to eliminate a cell that doesn't want to be eliminated, and everything in life is a bit like that. But anyway, I just thought to offer that framework as something that might be helpful to listeners. In all levels of life, to be able to try and just see these dynamics playing out and see where the most important thing I think is to see where you are. Like, what am I behaving like? Am I behaving like am I creating this dynamic by trying to be the savior? Am I creating this dynamic by wanting to be the victim and therefore like enabling this? Or am I the perpetrator? And if so, like what am I doing that maybe I should change? And there is like an alternative drama triangle, like a flip, is like an inverted version of it. It kind of works. I've never been like massively sold on it. I think the simple thing to say is really just, if you see the triangle, just try to think how you could shift your behavior and your own like story that you're telling yourself and how you're behaving, so that you're kind of neutralizing your own role in it. Because the triangle needs 3 players.
But I think it's telling me that, like, and in all seriousness, the problem is heroes.
The problem is heroes in it.
Because
Yeah.
the heroes, yeah, because everybody presents himself as a hero. Um, People who are defining the polarization line of purity testing are being heroic.
Yeah.
When I listen to the people who are producing whatever it for whatever means, like the hateful, like whatever the content that's there to create divisions and drive hate, they're playing the hero role. All the heroes that are visible heroes, and they're presenting themselves in such a way that they're a hero. Maybe they're the problem. The people that I know that are true heroes never present themselves as that.
No.
I know people that I've got this one mentee, Samed, does them currently. He's doing a philosophy. He's one of his major activity. What he's dedicated his life to is raising Palestinians. He's Palestinian by education through Olympiads, through like just teaching them. Look, you can compete in a maths Olympiad, in a computing Olympiad. He's currently doing a philosophy Olympiad, which I was just asking him a question. How can you have a
What even? Yeah,
competition
like,
about philosophy?
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's the first one they're doing. He's gonna love this fact to mention him. But he doesn't present himself as a hero. And like he's been in like Guardian he's casually mentioned one day, I've got a piece in the Guardian about me. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why is that not
As you do.
everywhere? Why is that not in your email? What is going on? He's like, yeah, I was just yeah. And it's like people who are heroes never really present themselves as heroes. They just get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they just do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you see this in politics where, and we've talked about this before when we talked about democracy, that people who would be really, really great benevolent leaders don't want to like put themselves on a pedestal, and they don't crave power. They're not seeking to like get everybody's attention and tell everybody to follow them. They're just people who are quietly beavering away, doing their thing, very humble. And in a way, it's kind of like it should be an alarm bell for anybody if somebody's standing on a pedestal saying like, "I've got all the solutions, follow me."
Yeah.
Those people are, the problem.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, well, even if they don't really mean it that way, it should be a bit of an alarm bell to say, like, they're probably not the person who's going to lead us to the promised land,
I think we landed on a solution, Tom.
Yeah,
I think we did.
I think
That's
we
a good
did.
one.
And
Wow.
I think we can all kind of transcend polarization within ourselves, even if we can't solve it for society
Yeah.
at large.
Yeah. I like it. All right, Tom, should we leave it there?
Yeah, on that note, if you want more unpolarized, nuanced, messy conversation, subscribe to House of Life.
House of Life. Yeah. Find all the major podcasts. And if you'd made it all the way through to the end, thank you so much for listening. It does really help us if you would be so kind as to share the podcast to others. If you want to go into kind of Spotify or other platforms and give us a 5-star rating or whatever star you think this is worth,
Yeah, well,
please
your
rate us.
honest review.
Your honest review.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
Tom.
Thanks,
Catch
Asim.
you later.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.